Sometimes the clearest test of your Christianity doesn't happen inside a church building. I mean, sometimes it happens while you're on the road before worship, with your family in the car, with somebody riding your bumper. And it's in that one little moment that you find out that your reflexes do not match your faith yet. Well, that's exactly what happened to me this past Sunday morning, headed to worship with my family in the car. Hey everybody, it's DJ here with another Monday Motivation. I hope your week has started out great. So here's what happened. So it's, again, like I said, it was yesterday morning. I was headed to worship. We were almost to the church building and everything was going fine. The family was in the car with me, and it's just a normal drive. Then I notice in the rearview mirror that there is a driver who is riding so close to my bumper, and he's making these hand gestures I'm going too slow for him. I don't know what got him irritated. I didn't think I was a pretty good driver. I didn't think I was doing anything out of the norm. I'm sad to say I got irritated, and I hit the brakes a little harder than I should have to get him to get off my bumper. I responded back with a similar gesture, like, hey, what are you getting all upset about? And then I pulled into the church parking lot. And that's when it hit me. My family saw that. I was going to worship, but I wasn't acting like Christ in the least little bit. And tell you, I was ashamed. I may have been right about his behavior because it was totally wrong, but I was wrong in my response, and I did that in front of my family. That bothered me, and not that I haven't had a bad moment before, but it was that small moment that sort of exposed something about me. Sometimes people are just rude, and someone just pushes our buttons so much that we end up handing them the remote control to our emotions. And then we later think, why in the world did I let something so small pull me away from who I'm trying to be? I got to thinking about what are some ways that I could try to do better next time. And I thought, well, maybe you might get something out of this too. So let's take a look at these ideas. So the idea number one is create a pause between that trigger that happens and your response. So in James 1:19 through 20, he says, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. You see, James writing to some Christians who are under pressure, and he doesn't pretend that anger is never going to show up. In fact, what he's doing is teaching us to slow the anger process down. You see, anger wants this speed. It wants us to get involved, and it wants this instant reaction. And James is like, whoa, 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 let's slow it down, slow it down. And if I had done that when I had saw this gentleman in the car behind me, it would have been so much better. I didn't need a 30-minute Bible study. I just needed a pause. I needed a breath, maybe a second to remember I'm not just driving, I'm representing Christ. And I'm not just representing Christ to the gentleman behind me, I'm representing Christ to my family. So before you answer, before you make a gesture, before you text somebody, before you post something on social media, before you hit back at whatever way you think that you might hit back, pause. Just stop for a minute. Do not trust your first impulse when you get angry. Just say that to yourself. Oh, we need to think about this before we actually respond. When we can kind of get this idea of taking a minute to catch our breath and to kind of focus, then that can lead us to maybe a second idea that might help us. And that's to reframe what we don't know is going on. See, in Proverbs 19 and verse 11, it says, good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. So here, the proverb writer is actually making this connection with patience. You see, a wise person doesn't treat every single offense like it deserves a reaction. And I think a wise and a strong person is someone who can overlook an offense. Not because it's okay, but because not every offense deserves our energy. I saw this driver behind me, and he's acting super impatient, and I'm not being unreasonable in how I'm driving. But I can't tell you I knew his story. Maybe he was late. Maybe he was distracted. Maybe the guy was just rude. I don't know. But in my mind, I had already judged the whole man from that one moment. Sometimes anger grows because we end up writing a story that, quite frankly, we can't prove. We judge them by saying, okay, well, they meant to disrespect me. They are trying to make me look stupid. They're trying to make me look bad in front of all these people. They did that on purpose. But if you start thinking like that, then your reaction is going to come out accordingly. But what would happen if our self-talk was a little bit better? What if we sat back and said, you know what, I don't know this guy's story. I don't know the whole story. And sometimes it might just be simple enough to sit there and go, Lord, help them. Just bless their heart and keep us both safe. So before you react, ask yourself, is there a more gracious way to understand this? And you'll be amazed at what that'll do. I'm going to try that. So then that would bring us to a third idea. Maybe we need to regulate instead of retaliate. In Galatians 5:22 through 23, it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law." You see, Paul is describing the fruit that's produced by the Holy Spirit. That self-control part, that's not about just avoiding a huge mistake. It shows up even in the small things, in those small little heated moments. And it shows up before the words come out, before there's any sort of gesture, before the brake check, or before some sort of sarcastic comment, before the angry email or text. You see, when I hit that brake a little harder than I should have, that was absolutely not self-control. That was me using my vehicle to send a message. And that message was more about retaliation than forgiveness or just letting it go. That's not strength. That's letting another person lead my behavior. So retaliation can sometimes feel powerful to us, but what it really means is that someone else is controlling you. My dad used to sit back and say, son, you gotta put your brain in gear before you put your mouth in motion. And I think that leads us to the fourth idea. Replace revenge with value-based actions. In Romans 17 and 18, it says, repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Paul's given Christians a clear way to think about conflict. You don't have to repay evil for evil. As much as it depends on you, that phrase right there, that is what really matters. As much as it depends on you. You can't control the other person. I couldn't control that guy that was in the car behind me. I wasn't in his car with him. I couldn't look over at him and sit there and say, hey, you're not acting right. They're just trying to get to church. So you can't control. What you can control, though, is what actually depends on you. So what does depend on you? Well, in my case, in that car, what depended on me was my speed, my response, my hands, my words, my example of Christ. I couldn't control him, but I could control me. And in that moment, I got to be honest, I didn't choose well. But you know what? Next time, I'm going to try to do better. Here's what I'm doing for myself. What I've learned from this mistake that I made in front of my family is that I'm not going to use my car to send a message anymore. Well, number one, I don't want to wreck my car. In fact, I was driving my wife's car, so I certainly don't want to wreck her car. And I'm not going to let a stranger make me act unlike Christ. I want to move closer to Christ. So next time, I'm just stop looking in the rearview mirror. I'm just going to keep going. Or if I'm at work, I'm just going to try to sit there and think that maybe this person's got something going on in their life. There's always another story or something. I'm not going to give insult with insult, and I'm prone to do that. I will care more about how I'm showing the example of Christ than trying to win in that one moment. I'm going to try to live more peaceably as far as it can depend on me. Look, I was on my way to worship, but worship hadn't yet shaped my response. Worship's not only about what happens in the church building. Worship should shape the person that we are trying to become. It should shape us and how we drive and how we talk and how we respond when someone disrespects us. Look, I get it. It's hard. It's very hard. How I act with my family is watching is something that should be important to me, not just them, but everybody else. As I've said before in some other Monday motivations, sometimes you're the only Bible that anyone will ever read. So how am I going to treat somebody who irritates me or frustrates me or wrongs me? We all make mistakes. And this week, when something small hits you wrong, and I hate to say it, odds are something will probably hit you wrong with your family at work. There's a lot of things that can trigger you, but what you need to do is to practice these four things that we've talked about. Pause before you respond. Take a breath. And don't trust that your first impulse when anger hits you is the right one to make. Try to reframe what you don't know. Give a person the benefit of the doubt. Be okay with being wrong. You don't have their story. You don't know what they're going through. And regulate instead of retaliate. Self-control is a strength. That's actually a more powerful person. That actually may be a better way of showing Christ and showing what kind of person you actually are. And as much as it depends on you, live peaceably with everybody. Here's what I want to leave you with. Following Jesus is not about believing the right things. It's about becoming the kind of person who reflects Jesus when life presses on you, even in traffic, even when you are right, even when someone else is wrong, even when somebody else starts it, even on the way to worship. Hey, remember God loves you, and I do too. Bye.